Now, Canadians are again really worried after seeing more comments coming out of Donald Trump about the 51st state. And Canadians want to send a message back. We will never be the 51st state. Not now, not ever. Never. And with all this, again, fear coming back up, people are worried about what this means for their jobs. People are worried what this means for their families. The trade war has put a lot of pressure on people around the cost of living. But we're also worried about what the negotiations are going to look like. And we recently learned that Mark Carney wasn't being totally straight up with us when he told us what happened with his first phone call with Donald Trump. He said that Donald Trump respected our sovereignty. Now it's come out that he instead actually brought back up the 51st state and again threatened our country in that call. Shame. I'm worried, I think as a lot of Canadians are worried, that if Mark Carney's not being straight up with us, he's not going to be straight up with us in the negotiations. And workers are worried about what's going to be on the table. You know, workers and working people should be at the negotiating table, not on the table. And we're worried about what Mark Carney's willing to give up, what he's willing to concede. And so we've got a message today that you need to elect New Democrats. One, to make sure that this process is transparent. We're going to fight to make sure Canadians know what's at stake, what the impact is before a vote comes to Parliament. Secondly, and most importantly, we are going to make sure that we will never let certain values that we hold dear ever be on the negotiating table. We will never give up and allow Donald Trump to attack workers' rights. That will never be on the table. Labor rights will never be given up. We're never going to let Donald Trump attack our healthcare system, our universal public healthcare system. We want to keep it Canadian. We do not want it to become Americanized, and we're going to fight back and never let that be on the negotiating table. We're going to make sure we fight to protect treaty rights and Indigenous rights. That's something we're never going to concede on. Yes. We're never going to concede on environmental protections because we care about our land, water, and air, and we're not going to give up our protections on those fundamental things. We know that Donald Trump and American billionaires have looked at our market and thought, you know, there's ways to make money here. If we Americanize healthcare, if we make it harder for people to access their medication, they're trying to target our country and target making money for billionaires in our country. And the only ones you can trust to fight back and defend your interests are New Democrats. NDP. And so in this election, don't let Mark Carney have all the power. We know what liberals do when they have all the power. They ignore working people. They give up on the folks that actually need to be supported. They are willing to sacrifice what you care about. We've seen it before. Mark Carney's proposing massive cuts, $28 billion in cuts confirmed in his electoral platform.
Shame.
And what's worse is, as recently as Monday, he said he's going to exceed those cuts. He's going to bring in massive cuts to our health care and to the services you need. So you need New Democrats to stand up and fight back. We're going to defend workers, defend Canadians. We know that Ottawa works best when one party doesn't have all the power. Ottawa works best when you send strong New Democrats like Leah Gazan and Leela Dance to fight for you and defend you and your family. Donc, mes amis,
so, friends, we are very concerned. In this election, we are facing the threats from Donald Trump. He's repeated those threats. So we have a message for him. We will never be the 51st state of the United States. We will defend our country. And what is worrisome is the fact that Mark Carney did not tell the entire truth about his first discussion with Donald Trump. In that discussion, he said that Donald Trump had respected our sovereignty, but we have learned since that that is not exactly the case. Donald Trump repeated his threat to make Canada the 51st state. So if Mark Carney is not telling all the details, that means we need New Democrats to make the negotiating process more transparent. You deserve transparency, and New Democrats will guarantee you that it's a transparent process. We'll know who is impacted and what the impact of those negotiations will be. And second, and this is even more important, we will guarantee that the values we hold dear will be defended in this negotiation. We will never make any concessions on a number of measures. There will never be any concessions on our public and universal health care system. There will never be any concessions on workers' rights. There will never be any concessions on our water, our natural resources, the rights of Indigenous communities, and the values that we hold dear. I'm here in Manitoba with workers because I want to remind everyone that we are fighting for these workers. And in this election, those are the people that must be the priority, not CEOs, not billionaires, but workers. We are fighting for them. So finally, what is clear is that when we give the Liberals all the power, they abandon people, they abandon workers. So we need strong New Democrats to defend your interests. So you have the power. You have the power to send MPs like Leela Dance and others to Ottawa to defend your families and your interests. You need New Democrats in Ottawa to defend the rights of workers, our public health care system, and that's exactly what New Democrats will do.
Merci, and with that, I'm ready for any questions you might have.
Thank you. We're ready for questions. We'll start with one question, one follow-up. On va prendre des questions. Une question, un suivi. Première question, Juliane Lapointe, Radio-Canada.
Hello, Mr. Singh. In your opening remarks, you talked about this, but I'm just wondering what it says to you, what has happened with the call with Mark Carney and the fact that he didn't say what was actually said, and what should this mean for Canadians after he repeated that he is the right person to face up to Donald Trump? Well, I think that shows that he didn't share the entire truth. He didn't share the entire story, and I think that's a problem. I think people are worried at this time because in these negotiations with Donald Trump, there can be massive effects on people's lives. There could be a massive impact on workers. So people deserve to know exactly what is going to happen in these negotiations. And the fact that Mark Carney did not share all the information about that call calls into question his ability to be transparent with Canadians, and it shows why you need New Democrats. We forced the government to sign an agreement so that there is more transparency. So that means people need to know what the issues are. People need to know what the impact of those negotiations could be, and that has to happen before there's a vote in Parliament. So there needs more transparency, and that means more New Democrats. And also to defend values that are important to Canadians, values like our health care system, and protecting the rights of workers, protecting our environment. If you vote for the NDP, we will defend those values. We will say no. We will never make concessions on those important values. So I think that this situation shows the importance of having more New Democrats in Ottawa.
I think what we've learned from this phone call with Donald Trump is that Mr. Carney was not being straight up with Canadians. He was not being straight up, and now Canadians have a lot of questions. If he's not going to tell us exactly what went down and say one thing and kind of the opposite happened, he said that Donald Trump respected our sovereignty And instead, now it's being reported that Donald Trump, in fact, repeated the threats of the 51st state. So Canadians are wondering, well, what else is going to happen? If he's not going to tell us about a phone call, what about the details of the negotiation? And what about what he's willing to trade away? So if you're worried about all that, as a lot of Canadians are, send New Democrats to Ottawa, and we will fight back and defend what you hold dear. We will fight back for you. NDP, 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 NDP. Merci. Thank you. Yes.
Oui, en relance, François Legault
Yes,
ce matin.
François Legault was calling on the party leaders this morning because of the number of temporary immigrants going into Quebec and the fact that Quebec doesn't have the ability to receive all of them. What would you do in this case? Well, in general, on immigration issues, I would say that for a long time the federal government has not properly funded or provided the necessary resources, particularly in Quebec, for Quebec to be able to deal with people crossing the border irregularly. And the federal government has a responsibility to properly fund this process. So that has been a problem in the past, and it's something that has to be fixed. In general, with the number of immigrants that have come to Canada, obviously we need immigrants to come to Canada. But we need experts to tell us what the best number is for us to meet our labor needs, but also be able to respond and properly integrate these immigrants. Mr. Singh, at this stage of the campaign, are you confident that you will be able to keep your 3 ridings in Manitoba? Yes, absolutely. We're not taking anything for granted, but you have incredible MPs here in Manitoba. They've shown just how strong New Democrats can be. With these 3 Manitoba Democrats, we delivered pharmacare, free medications for people with diabetes, far more than what the Conservatives have done. So only 3 New Democrat MPs delivered more than 10 Conservative MPs. And that shows the strength of New Democrats. Here in Winnipeg, here in Manitoba, you need New Democrats in Parliament who will defend your interests.
Sure. Absolutely. People saw the benefit of having 3 New Democrats here in Manitoba. 3 New Democrats delivered far more than all the Conservatives combined in this province. Just 3. And look at what these 3 New Democrats delivered for you. Free diabetes medication and devices. Manitoba is the first province to sign the deal. Your 3 New Democrat MPs delivered free diabetes medication and devices for so many people in this province. 3 New Democrats delivered dental care for thousands and thousands of Manitobans. This is what you get. These 3 New Democrats delivered far more than all the Conservative MPs in this province combined. I believe the people of Winnipeg, the people of Manitoba deserve New Democrats who are going to fight for them.
Vous vous trouvez dans 3 courses très différentes ici au Manitoba contre les conservateurs et les libéraux.
You are fighting the Conservatives and the Liberals in urban ridings. How will this influence your campaign strategy? Well, in fact, the critical question here is who will fight for you and not for the ultra-rich or billionaires. It's the same issue in both rural and urban ridings. Who will defend you? And we have shown that we, New Democrats, are prepared to help everyday Canadians, to defend the interests of the Indigenous communities. We are fighting to preserve your rights. But the other parties have already shown their plan. The Conservative plan is to make massive cuts, and Mark Carney's plan is also to cut. So we are the only party that will say we have to defend our healthcare system. We have to invest more in that system to make it stronger. And we have to target workers' priorities. That is our offer to Canadians. That is our priority.
David Thurton, CBC News.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Singh. In light of what we're hearing about Trump's 51st state comments to Mark Carney, the Liberal leader, and also his most recent comments about auto tariffs and whatnot, do you think this amounts to meddling in our election?
Well, it's certainly having a massive impact on our country, and it's a threat to our sovereignty. I'm worried about what it means to people. I mean, it's a massive threat to working class folks. It's a massive threat to everyday Canadians who are worried about, one, losing their job, and two, the cost of things getting more expensive. So in all of that, I think what it reminds us all is you need someone that's going to fight for you and your family. In Ottawa, we know when the Liberals have all the power, they ignore the struggles of everyday families. They forget about working people. They don't actually prioritize your needs. We know that. We've seen that again and again. And they cut. And they want to cut at a time when we need to be defending. We need to be supporting. We need to be lifting up and investing. The Liberals want to cut the things that you need. And so if you want to fight back against those cuts, the cuts of Conservatives, the cuts of Liberals, you want to defend the things that matter to us, our universal health care, you want to expand pharmacare, you want to make sure we make life more affordable, the New Democrats are the ones who will always defend the interests of the working class, of the middle class, of working people. Je pense que les propos de Donald Trump
I think
menacent
that
notre pays.
Donald Trump's comments are a threat to our country. He's threatening our workers. He's threatening our economy.
Je pense ça, c'est le grand problème.
And I think that's the major issue. We need to respond to that threat, and you deserve someone who will fight to defend your interests, not the interests of billionaires or rich CEOs, but someone who will defend the interests of workers, defend protections for workers, defend our healthcare system, and strengthen our healthcare system. In the face of the proposals to cut under the Conservatives and the plan to cut under Mark Carney, we are in fact the only party that can defend our healthcare system and all the values that we hold dear.
Mr. Singh, it's hard to see how your leadership is not on the line in this election. So what metric are you using to determine whether or not you stay or you leave?
What's on the line in this election are working people and everyday families. That's what's on the line. That's what I'm focused on. We got 4 days left of this campaign, and we got working people out here. We got middle-class families out here wondering, who's going to fight for me? Who's going to stand up for me? I'm never going to back down for fighting for those folks. We're the only party talking about putting in a ban on corporate landlords from buying up affordable homes. The only party talking about national rent control. The only party saying we got to put in a price cap on food essentials so people can afford their groceries. You know, for all those folks out there that are worried, they're saying, what about me? What about my concerns? I got your back. New Democrats, we got your back.
Rachel Ayala, CTV News.
I would like to ask my question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
The
We're
Liberals,
just having a good time here, you know?
I see that. Happy for you. The Liberals' final ad of the election dropped this morning, and a source tells CTV News the aim is to show a more progressive side of Mark Carney in an effort to target NDP and Green swing voters. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that we're seeing more and more people that are worried about Mark Carney's cuts. And so they're trying to hide from that. And Mark Carney can't run from his record. His record is, at a time when people are worried about the housing crisis, he was a chair of a large corporation, a corporate landlord, that profited off the housing crisis. You know, we're in a time when people are looking at Mark Carney's plans, and his plan is to cut massively, $28 billion in cuts, and more that he promised on Monday, even more than that. Shame. So people are looking at his plans and saying, wait a second, hold up. That sounds like a bad idea, to cut at a time when we need to defend, to take away from our healthcare when we need to invest in our healthcare. And so people are looking at it and starting to be really worried. So I could see why Mark Carney wants to say, hey, no, actually, I'm actually a progressive. Well, the facts don't lie. And the facts are his plan was to spend $19 billion on a tax cut for mostly millionaires and to cut $28 billion from your services. That is not someone that is a progressive. That is not someone that's defending you and your family. And so Canadians are right to be worried about it. So if you're a New Democrat out there who's worried, thinking who's going to actually defend what I care about, we are. New Democrats are the only ones who are going to defend what you care about.
That was Jagmeet Singh speaking in Winnipeg this hour. And we're, of course, in the final few days before voters head to the polls. And U.S. President Donald Trump is once again playing, as you heard, a major role in the conversation on the campaign trail. Singh addressed Trump's most recent comments yesterday that Canada should be America's 51st state, referencing some reporting from our colleagues at Radio Canada that state that essentially what we heard of that conversation between Carney and Trump on the 28th may have been different from the actual contents of that conversation. I want to bring in the CBC's Janice McGregor from Ottawa. And, you know, we were listening into Jagmeet Singh's remarks, and perhaps it's important to point out there that he began his remarks addressing the conversation between Carney and Trump's comments about Canada right off the top, despite also having other announcements to do with healthcare and Indigenous rights.
Yeah, there is a way that it all goes together, though, because on the one hand, as you say, Jagmeet Singh making the point that Mark Carney wasn't completely straight with Canadians, that he didn't share the entire story, that he wasn't transparent about exactly what happened in that phone call with the U.S. president. But there's a bigger point to this in terms of the message that they were out on today. If you look at sort of the various things that he was touching on in the news, they're all the things that New Democrats believe need to be protected in a future negotiation with the Americans, all things that they feel should not be for sale. Things like waters, things like treaty rights, things like Canada's healthcare system. There's sort of an elaborate list of resources and public infrastructure and different kind of things that make Canada Canada that New Democrats believe need to be protected in the coming negotiation. And they are using this latest disclosure, this latest reporting from our colleagues as proof that there's a reason somehow not to trust Mark Carney, to sort of feel you need more New Democrats in Parliament to keep an eye on what the Liberals are doing. Interestingly, I'll note he's in Winnipeg in a riding, campaigning to get an MP re-elected in a seat that used to belong to Danielle Blakey. And when Blakey was there, when he was on the Trade Committee, he actually sought and received a deal with the Liberals, Chrystia Freeland at the time helming trade files, that they had to go to Parliament and table the economic impact and table notice of any trade agreement and table the objectives of a trade agreement before proceeding with implementation legislation and ratification of a trade agreement as negotiated. Now, that was kind of a COVID-era conversation around the old CUSMA, but this is now actually how Parliament works. That was something that an NDP MP worked out with the former Trudeau government. So they're saying, look, what we did, we need to be there in the next Parliament to keep pushing for this transparency.
For this, Janice, that is the CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. And a live look at the breaking news that we continue to cover. We know that you're looking at Toronto's Pearson International Airport. Authorities confirm police shot and killed a man outside Terminal 1 departures just before 7 a.m. this morning. No officers were injured. The shooting happened while police were responding to a man in distress who is said to have produced a firearm. Further details straight ahead on CBC News Network.